Thank you all for coming. And without further ado, I introduce former Arizona Governor Evan Mecham.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming for this occasion, and I'm going to anticipate. I'll give you a little overview of the book itself, why I wrote it. I'll answer the most often questions asked, and then feel free to any questions that you have. Since I am supposed to be sometimes a controversial figure, why some of you may have some questions, and those of you who've been in Arizona for a decade or more will understand that. The question of why to write this book now, 10 years, 11 years after the fact, is often asked me. I made the record of this book primarily for my family. I've never thought that even though the unusual occasion of being removed by impeachment was certainly almost unheard of, and certainly in the lifetime of anybody who's alive today, that I didn't need to explain it, because the people who counted, the honest people of Arizona, and certainly the majority of them, were very much in support of me as governor, and the people who removed me were not the ones that they were negating an election, and certainly were not the ones that I really concerned myself with in their opinion. About a year and a half ago, the press wanted to have a 10-year rollback and come out and say, well, what you've been doing for 10 years, people ask once in a while about you. What would be the prime one that concerned me was the one they said, what would Arizona be like if you'd remained governor for this last 10 years? And I said, a lot different, and that'll be the last chapter of my book, and I will bring it out. And so I brought it out under, don't tell the press that they're the ones that got this book wrote. They would take that. I'm kidding, of course. But I wanted it for another reason very important, and that is, I've watched for 10 years what's happened in Arizona since I was removed from office. I know what we were doing, and in fact, as I was driving up here on Loop 101, one of the things that happened in my administration was the fact that we moved this freeway line from taking a swath of developed land down Scottsdale that would have cost something like $600 million to have done, to buy all the houses and whatnot, and actually disrupted the city. And so I knew somewhat of the Indian tribe, and proposed and worked out with them to move it inside the reservation. And of course, when they looked at and seen what an economic boom that was for them, made them a very rich tribe in increasing the value of the land. But the thing that I was driven primarily for was because it saved the taxpayers of Arizona on building this strip of road from down there when it takes off up to here, over $250 million, and that was rather important. I have watched with great interest as this 10 years went by and thought, if Arizona could straighten itself up and really cleanse itself from its past policies that I have thought were disgraceful in the administration of a number of the people at the head of the state, that would be fine with me. I didn't need the job. I always said, and some might think this is egotistical, but I thought the job needed me much more than I needed the job. So it didn't break my heart to get removed, but what has been a terrible disappointment is what's happened to Arizona since. And that's what I wrote in the last chapter, to show people what really has happened. Now, we projected for this 10 years what our policies were doing and what our policy was. And as you'll notice, for example, in this year alone, it means a difference of $2 billion to the taxpayers of this state. And with a under 5 million population state, that's a pretty good little dividend for everybody here, and that certainly would have been the case. One of the things, however, that I did not put in the book was the fact was to cover the drug problem anywhere near completely. I don't know of anyone who has gone as strongly as I did in campaigning for office on what we needed to do about drugs. 10 10, 12 years ago, our crime was skyrocketing. Everybody was worrying about that. And I said, the real answer to get rid of drugs is to drain the swamp. I had been involved in this back in the state senate many years ago in getting some much better laws for to hold down the drug traffic, and then they'd been somewhat effective, but it needed a lot more. So I told the people of this state, if they elected me, that we would get rid of drugs, and I would do all I could to eliminate them the first 2 years. Of course, that brought some, you know, is he nuts? You can't get rid of drugs, number one, and number two, can you do it in 2 years? Actually, we knew that we couldn't do it entirely in 2 years, but we would make a big bite out of it. And so I led the way and got the legislature to pass some very tough bills, and also we put quite a bit more money into enforcement. But the main thing was something that isn't done by chief executives anywhere near enough, and that is to really mean it and involve the public into the activities of what we're trying to do. We set up a program to contact every organization of every kind in the state, cities, counties, all government, church, schools, business, fraternal, you name it, in order to get, because the answer is, don't rely on the government to do everything, but to get the people involved and use their peer pressure within their own organizations. And we were starting to make some real progress on drugs. Well, lo and behold, then this comes along. The reason that I did not, I'm not afraid to say so, but I didn't put it in the book because I couldn't prove any of who they were, and everything else is it's well documented, and that is that we have people in high places in Arizona who are making tremendous money off of drugs, as does most people in most states and certainly our federal government. And drugs is destroying our country, and it's a crime, but that really was the push that left it. As one fellow on one of the law enforcement agencies said after I was voted out of office, said, I was glad you were voted out. He was a good supporter. And he says, you'll think that's funny. And I said, yes, unusual. And he said, they saved your life by voting you out because you were going to be gone one way or the other. Well, I doubt that. I never felt I was in proud of that. But anyway, that was really the big issue. And so those of you who do read the book will be seeing all the other things, but I did not dwell on what really the most motivating and the one that really put the power behind getting me out. Because the minute I was out, the Arizona's Alliance for a Drug-Free State was done away with. They just folded the tent, as they did on some other programs, and that one, though, right away was gone. So I wanted to mention that to you because that isn't in the book to the importance that it would be if I had felt comfortable, because then in the book I don't fear anybody come back and asking me to prove anything, because I've lived it. I know the details. They're all there. And interestingly enough, as we sent copies out to the press and other people, earlier this year, I've not heard a word from anybody who aren't happy with what I've written, and some pretty prominent names in that. Some pretty prominent names from the past. I call your attention to Chapter 3, the Central Arizona Project, and no place else in the state of Arizona will you find anybody who has written the fact about the boondoggle and the sellout of this state in the Central Arizona Project. I won't go into it, but do read it, and you'll find, and I've written the book, at least that was my desire to write it, in language that doesn't use a whole lot of flowery things. I wrote it so it was easy to read, and it was you went right. And I didn't work to keep any page-turner concern in it. I just wrote it to tell the story, but I think it is entertaining. Aside from that, I could talk about a lot of other things, but I would prefer to respond to a few of your questions if you have some, and then we'll go ahead and have the signing. Anyone have any questions? Yes.
Well, I just finished reading Hayden's book, or the book on Hayden, and California from 1922 on right into the late 70s, or 60s and early 70s, was against this Central Arizona project. And without government aid, the federal government would probably never be able to do anything from Arizona's standpoint. And I was just wondering how you figure...
Using the Central Arizona project, and all of you who've been around here for a while understand that that's kind of the holy grail, the Central Arizona project. In 1962, and the reason I included it in the book, I won the nomination and opposed Senator Hayden in the general election. One of the things that I had high hopes of doing, and that was to secure the Central Arizona project with private money. I have in my files, as does a lot of other people that will never admit to it, where the big financial houses in New York and Boston committed themselves to raise $1.15 billion to build 2 hydroelectric dams on the Colorado River to produce cheap power for the Southwest and particularly for Arizona, and then build the canal works. Senator Hayden particularly, who wanted federal activity instead of state. We have a great difference of opinion there. All government should be as close to the people as you can get it, and the federal government has no place in its Constitution where the states allowed it to be involved in reclamation projects, even though with this large one to start off with, it was really not, shouldn't have been done. With federal money, a number of others have, as have many other things that do not stick to the constitutional powers of the federal government. Senator Hayden was essentially a grand old man, and he and I visited after that campaign and were very friendly. There was nothing personal. It was the fact that a great difference in philosophy. He believed in federal control. I believe in state control, which is what the Constitution lays out. Now, the end result is on the Central Arizona project, and that is it would have been built and been ready to go in 1972, complete in all of its aspects, for this $1.15 billion. Every time, and they still haven't settled it, and in order to get California, with its overpowering numbers of members of the House against our few, they would not pass the bill. They kept it from being passed until Arizona agreed that our 2.8 million acre feet, which was adjudicated and awarded to Arizona, that rather than that being a guarantee, and then if the river was lower than the allocations, which on drought there's some years it would, then we would all take proportionally less. We agreed. I didn't agree, but Hayden and Goldwater and Rhodes and the Udall brothers all agreed that Arizona would give California whatever, all of hers that she had coming, and if all that's left is dry sand for us, that's what we get. And that's what's on the books today. I probably use as rough a language as I ever use about anyone on that chapter, because the fantastic amount of money that is the difference between that $4 billion boondoggle, and of course here we have the federal government saying who gets the water and who this and who that, and you've seen it in the, I think it was yesterday morning's Daily Disappointment, which said that the Indians are going to get half the water after all this, and probably we're going to pay, but it should have never been allowed. There was a bill put in to stop Arizona from getting its license to build the 2 dams by the Federal Power Commission. The licenses were ready. Hayden and Udall got President Johnson to put out an executive order forbidding the Federal Power Commission, which is an arm of Congress, to not issue that license. And that's, had we had the license, needed nothing else from the federal government, because it's an interstate stream, and it would have been built. The more expensive atomic energy plant, nuclear plant at Palo Verde would have never been built. We would have plenty of power without that, and it would be much cheaper. And the price of the water, which this started out, CAP started out as an agricultural, of course a lot of it since we're growing a lot more houses than we are crops, but the water would have been substantially less expensive. I get at my most anger that I ever feel is for people who run for a public office and then go together and serve themselves and other interests than the people they were elected to serve. I think the hottest reaches of hell are waiting for those kind of people, and there's a lot of them. And so the last thing I wanted to add one more thing. I'm still answering your question there, and I think I've handled that, but I did want to mention one more thing. In this chapter 24, which is Arizona then and 10 years later, by very conservative calculations on my part, meaning that we would have done that well or better, this year the budget would be $4 billion instead of $6 billion, and the other $2 billion would remain in the pocketbooks of the taxpayers of Arizona. That would have been a good dividend. That's just one of many things that would have been better. Okay, any other questions that anyone has? If not, why, we'll just go ahead and pull up a chair, and if any of you would like me to autograph your book, I'll be happy to do so. This is one of the things I did miss one thing, and that is we are pushing this nationally, and we're getting pretty good response nationally because it's an Arizona story, but the way the way corruption enters into governments is the same everywhere, and the same human tendencies. It's like I was speaking to a talk show man in Topeka, Kansas, I guess last week, and he said, well, do you think we've got any corruption in Kansas? And I says, yeah, if you got a government today, you got some. Probably not near as bad as ours is, because we're a border state, but you got some, and your people need to recognize, and that's what this book will do, is show people how to recognize what's happening behind the closed doors.
I think you get your right there.
Wherever you'd like it. Okay. Do you want anything with just my signature? Okay.
Is the one okay? You supposed to sign a baseball?
Well,
Sign it in the blue one there.
All
right there,
right.
and what's called the sweet spot right there.
Okay. That one's a little harder to do, so it'll be quite scribbly. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank
it
you.
very much. Good
Thank
luck to you.
Thank you.
I don't have a book, but I have a question that occurred to me. It seems
Okay.
like what you're saying is one of the means of reducing corruption in government is just to reduce government, period.
Well, that would help, but no, the way to get rid of corruption is get people with integrity in office. And the public understand that they aren't so stupid that they can understand, and for them to not put up with all these unanswered questions and not put up with things like Bank One Ballpark that was special legislation quietly run through so that they could put it over when Jerry said he knew the people would vote it down. We can't do that, so we got to put it in without asking them.
There seems a lot of that in Arizona.
Well, you see, that's because this same group has been running the show, and so that's the answer. I think if you read the book, you'll get the full flavor of what I'm talking about. I didn't go after people in it, but I have been there since 1960 in this whole scheme. So I'm not some outsider writing a book. I'm writing about what I'm in the middle of, you know, as we go, and my experiences, and using that as the thing. I think you'll find it fascinating.
Well, anyway, it was a pleasure hearing you speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You bet.